It started like any other semester at Ridgewood University. The sun was shining down on the sprawling campus, students rushing between classes, their minds consumed with the usual stress of schoolwork, assignments, and midterm exams. The trees lining the walkways rustled gently in the breeze, as if unaware of the heavy burden that many students carried, dreams and aspirations intertwined with the overwhelming weight of financial debt. Among the students was Sarah Mitchell, a senior majoring in engineering. To anyone who looked at her, she seemed like just another student in the sea of faces walking hurriedly across campus. But behind the worn-out sneakers, the faded hoodie, and the backpack that always seemed too heavy, Sarah was carrying something far heavier, the crushing reality of student loans that she'd soon have to pay off if she could ever afford to. Sarah had always been a hard worker, ever since she was a child. Growing up in a modest household, she learned early that nothing came easy. Her parents, though supportive, couldn't help much when it came to paying for her education. They had their own struggles to deal with. So, Sarah had worked part-time jobs throughout high school and college, always saving a little, doing whatever she could to make ends meet. Her days were a blur of lectures, homework, late-night study sessions, and shifts at the local coffee shop. The money she earned went straight to her tuition fees, rent, and other bills. There was little left for herself, but she didn't mind. The goal was always the same: to graduate, to succeed, and to somehow find a way out of the financial chaos she had been trapped in since the first day she stepped onto campus. But there were days when the strain felt unbearable. The sleepless nights, the constant worry about how she would pay for her textbooks or if she could afford her next meal. Each semester seemed to bring a new mountain of bills, each more daunting than the last. Her friends, too, faced the same challenges, and it was a constant reminder that the education they all dreamed of was also the thing keeping them in chains. As Sarah walked across the campus on that particular day, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had just finished a grueling exam and was heading to her next class, trying to ignore the tightness in her chest. With each passing day, it became clearer that no matter how hard she worked, the debt was always one step ahead of her. Graduation was fast approaching, and with it, the bitter truth: she was about to enter the world, not as a hopeful graduate, but as someone drowning in loans that would take decades to pay off. But little did she know, change was coming. It was a change so unexpected, so extraordinary, that no one, least of all Sarah, could have predicted it. Unbeknownst to everyone at Ridgewood University, a quiet benefactor had been watching. He was someone who had been keeping an eye on the struggles of students like Sarah. This benefactor had been watching from afar, aware of the silent desperation that filled the hearts of students across the country. He saw their bright minds, their potential, but he also saw the system that stood in their way, a system that burdened them with debts they could never hope to pay off, no matter how successful they became. This benefactor was not someone who appeared in the headlines or spoke at big conferences. He wasn't a politician, a billionaire philanthropist with a large public following, or an academic figure who commanded attention. No, this was a figure so unlikely, so unexpected, that his involvement would soon shock the world. He was someone who had quietly amassed wealth through ventures that most people didn't fully understand, and he had always kept his presence behind the scenes. Few knew his name, and fewer still knew the depth of his intentions. But what Sarah and her classmates didn't realize was that this mysterious figure had been watching the university closely. He had seen the same cycle repeated year after year: bright students, full of ambition and potential, entering into a financial system that kept them shackled, unable to reach their full potential. He had seen enough. And so, without anyone knowing, he set a plan in motion, a plan that would change everything. The students at Ridgewood University would soon find out that their lives were about to be altered in a way they could never have imagined. The system that had held them back for so long would be challenged in a way that had never been done before. A storm was brewing, and though no one could see it yet, it was heading straight for them. For years, Students like Sarah Mitchell had struggled with the same problem, the crushing burden of tuition fees, student loans, and the harsh realization that graduating from Ridgewood University wasn't just about receiving a degree. It wasn't just about walking across the stage to grab a diploma, it was about stepping out into a world where the debt followed you, like a shadow that never left. Sarah had seen it happen to so many students. They worked hard, they dreamed big, and they fought to make their families proud, but in the end, when they received their diploma, they didn't leave with a sense of freedom. They left with the weight of loans that could take decades to pay off. And every day they worked hard, it was a reminder of how the system was designed to keep them struggling. The rising tuition fees only added to the problem. Every year, the cost of education seemed to go up, while the chances of finding a job with a decent salary seemed to stay the same, or even worsen. Sarah had seen her friends, bright, talented people with a lot of potential, feeling stuck. Some had already taken on more loans just to stay in school. Others had left school early to take jobs they didn't want, simply because they couldn't afford to stay in college any longer. And what about Sarah? She was determined to graduate. She was determined to finish what she had started. She had always known it wouldn't be easy, but she hadn't realized how much the burden would weigh on her. Every day, she worked hard at school, studied late into the night, and balanced a part-time job at the campus bookstore. But when she looked at the price tag for her education, she could hardly see the light at the end of the tunnel. It was easy to feel lost in a system that seemed so unfair. Sarah often asked herself if it was all worth it. Would the degree she earned truly make a difference in her life? Or would it only add more pressure to an already overburdened reality? The idea of a future free of debt seemed impossible. It wasn't just Sarah. The same struggles were shared by nearly every student she knew. And no one seemed to have an answer. Professors, though they were brilliant and passionate about their subjects, spent more time discussing theories about education and social change than actually addressing the very real problems students faced every day. When the topic of student debt was brought up in class, it was often in passing, almost as if it was a topic too large to tackle, too complex to fix. Meanwhile, the university's administration tried to ease the tension with flashy campaigns. They hosted fundraiser events that were meant to support students, but the truth was, they barely made a dent in the financial struggles most students faced. Sarah had seen the flyers for the Student Success fundraisers hanging on the bulletin boards around campus. The events were fun, of course, but in the end, they seemed to do nothing more than put a band-aid on a deep wound. There was talk of solutions, sure. The university president had once announced that they were exploring ways to make tuition more affordable, but that had been years ago, and nothing had really changed. The financial aid office seemed overwhelmed and understaffed, struggling to meet the needs of every student who came in with questions about grants, loans, or scholarships. Each year, Sarah heard the same things: "We're doing the best we can," or "It's not our fault, but we understand how tough it is." The system felt rigged, and the students, like Sarah, were caught in a never-ending cycle of hope and disappointment. It was a silent battle, fought by every student who sat in those crowded classrooms or stared at their mountain of bills in the dorm rooms. They all had dreams, but those dreams were being smothered by the weight of financial struggles. They couldn't fight the system because they had no power. They couldn't challenge the system because they were too busy trying to survive in it. Sarah, like many others, had become resigned to the idea that relief was impossible. She focused on getting through each day, trying to ignore the constant stress that threatened to overwhelm her. She worked as hard as she could, but even as she watched her classmates struggle, she began to feel like there was no way out. The future that once seemed full of potential now felt like a series of obstacles, each one higher than the last. But on one seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning, something happened that would change everything. It started like any other day. Sarah woke up early, as usual, to prepare for class. She didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. The campus was quiet, as it always was early in the morning, and the hum of students milling about seemed far away from the thoughts swirling in her mind about her tuition and the looming bills. She checked her phone before heading to class, half-heartedly scrolling through emails. Most of them were from professors or student organizations, reminding her of upcoming deadlines or events. But then, in the middle of all the usual clutter, one email stood out. The subject line read, "Special announcement for Ridgewood students." At first, Sarah didn't think much of it. It was just another campus-wide email. But there was something about it that caught her attention, something that made her pause for a second. She had been getting the usual updates about scholarships, but none of them ever seemed to make a difference. She hadn't expected any life-changing news to come from her inbox, but she opened it anyway. The email was brief but enough to make her sit up straight. Dear Ridgewood students, we are pleased to announce an important update that will impact your future at this university. Please join us in the auditorium at 2 p.m. today for a special announcement from a very important benefactor who has generously decided to support the students of Ridgewood University in a way never seen before. This announcement will change the course of your academic journey. Please attend. This will be one you won't want to miss. Ridgewood University Administration. Sarah blinked. She couldn't believe what she was reading. A benefactor? Supporting students in a way never seen before? She was skeptical. It was probably just another fundraising initiative or a new scholarship opportunity. But something in the tone of the email felt different. A wave of curiosity washed over her, mingled with a small spark of hope. Was this the relief they had all been waiting for? Was this the announcement that would finally challenge the financial system that had kept so many students like her in a chokehold for years? She quickly closed the email and packed her things, feeling a mix of doubt and excitement as she made her way to the auditorium. The announcement that had been sent out early that morning had already started to stir up a mixture of excitement and skepticism among the students. There was a buzz in the air as Sarah made her way to the campus auditorium. She could hear snippets of conversation as she walked, students discussing what they thought the announcement might be about. "Do you think it's a new scholarship?" someone asked. "I bet it's another fundraising campaign," another voice replied, sounding tired and unenthusiastic. "Yeah, probably. But you never know," a third voice added. "Maybe it's something big." As Sarah walked down the hallway, she could see groups of students gathered in small clusters, all eagerly debating what the event would be. The tone of the conversation seemed hopeful, but there was an undertone of caution. Everyone had been let down before. The university had promised big things in the past: scholarships, grants, relief, and each time, it felt like they barely made a dent in the ever-growing pile of student debt. Sarah knew exactly how they felt. She had attended those previous events where grand promises were made, only to leave feeling more discouraged than when she arrived. She couldn't help but wonder if today would be different. The email had sounded urgent, but that didn't mean it would be life-changing. It was just another announcement, right? But something told her this was not like the others. She could feel it in the air, a kind of tension mixed with hope that she hadn't experienced before. As she entered the auditorium, the excitement in the room was palpable. Students were filling every available seat. Some sat with their arms crossed, trying to remain cool, while others whispered eagerly to their friends, speculating wildly about what the announcement might be. The room buzzed with a mix of energy, excitement, and doubt. It was clear that no one really knew what was going to happen, but everyone was eager to find out. Sarah found a seat near the middle of the auditorium. She glanced around, noticing the familiar faces of her classmates, all of them waiting with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. She could hear a few people around her still whispering about their guesses. "I'm telling you, it's probably just some new loan program or something," a guy to her left murmured. "Maybe, but what if it's something bigger?" a girl responded, her voice tinged with excitement. Sarah didn't know what to think. She didn't want to get her hopes up too much, but a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. The university had never sent out an email like this before. The words "important update" and "benefactor" caught her attention. Who was this person, and why would they be so interested in Ridgewood students? Her thoughts raced as the clock ticked down to the scheduled start time. As the minutes passed, the lights in the auditorium dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd as everyone shifted in their seats, eager for whatever was about to happen. Sarah's heart raced in her chest, a mix of anticipation and uncertainty swirling inside her. The stage was dark, but then, the sound of a voice filled the room. It was calm, almost comforting, and yet there was something about it that grabbed everyone's attention immediately. The screen at the front of the room flickered to life, and for a split second, Sarah wondered if the event was going to be some kind of announcement from the university's president or another university official. But then, to her surprise, a live video feed appeared on the screen. And then, a face appeared, a face that made the entire room go still. It was Elon Musk. The crowd gasped collectively. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. Was this real? Was she dreaming? She had heard of Musk before, of course, who hadn't? The billionaire entrepreneur, the CEO of SpaceX and Tesla, the man behind some of the most ambitious tech projects in the world. But what was he doing here? What could he possibly have to say to the students of Ridgewood University? There he was, sitting casually in a minimalist office, his signature smirk lighting up the screen. He looked as relaxed as if he were talking to an old friend, but there was an intensity in his eyes, something that immediately caught the attention of everyone in the room. "Hello, Ridgewood University," Musk said, his voice calm but commanding. "I believe it's time to address an issue that's been holding too many of you back." The room fell silent. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't what anyone had expected. A new scholarship? A loan program? These were things they could handle, things they could at least prepare for. But this was something else entirely. Musk's eyes seemed to scan the room through the camera, as if he were looking directly at each of them. His voice was steady as he continued, but there was an edge of sincerity that made his words feel more real than anything the students had heard before. "For years, you've been told that the only way to succeed is to go into debt. You've been told that you need to work multiple jobs, sacrifice your future, just to get a piece of paper that tells the world you're qualified to do something. And that paper? It's expensive. The system is broken, and it's not right. You deserve better." There was a murmur in the crowd, a mix of shock and disbelief. Musk was speaking directly to them, to their struggles. To Sarah's struggle. He was speaking about the very thing that had haunted her every day since she'd enrolled at Ridgewood, the crushing weight of student debt. Musk paused for a moment, allowing his words to sink in, and Sarah could feel the tension building in the room. What was he going to say next? "I've been watching closely," Musk continued, his voice steady but filled with a hint of passion. "And I've seen enough. I've seen too many students here struggling with debt, putting off their dreams, working themselves to exhaustion, all for the chance to graduate and start their lives. But that shouldn't be the way it works. Education should open doors, not lock you into a lifetime of financial burden." At this point, the room was absolutely still. Sarah could feel the eyes of every person in the room on the screen, hanging on Musk's every word. What was he getting at? Was he about to announce a huge donation? Or was he going to tell them about some kind of loan forgiveness program? Musk leaned forward slightly in his chair, his expression serious now. "I know you've all been promised solutions before. But this time, I'm not just talking about a new scholarship or a donation. This time, I'm doing something that will actually change the way things are done." Sarah's heart began to race. What could he possibly mean? What was he going to do? The silence was deafening. Then, Musk's smirk returned, just slightly, but it was enough to make everyone hold their breath. I'm here today to tell you that I've made a decision. A decision that will impact every single one of you in this room. Today, I am paying off every single student loan for every student currently enrolled at Ridgewood University. The room erupted. The sound was deafening, a mixture of gasps, disbelief, and excitement. Sarah's eyes went wide as the weight of his words sank in. This couldn't be real. He couldn't possibly be serious. She was hearing it right, wasn't she? He was going to pay off the loans. All of them. I know this might be hard to believe, Musk said, his calm voice cutting through the noise. But it's true. Every single student loan, paid in full. No more debt. You are all free to pursue your dreams without that weight holding you back. The room fell into stunned silence once again. Then, slowly, students began to whisper to each other, their voices rising as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Sarah sat frozen in her seat, her mind spinning. She felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her. Was this really happening? Was this some kind of joke? A dream? But it wasn't a joke. It was real. It was happening. Musk's words cut through the room like a thunderbolt. The auditorium, once buzzing with excitement and uncertainty, fell into a deep, shocked silence. Every student's breath seemed to hitch at once. Time itself appeared to freeze. And then, with the kind of finality that could change lives forever, Elon Musk spoke the words that would change everything for the students of Ridgewood University. As of today, I have personally cleared every single student loan owed by anyone enrolled at Ridgewood University. The silence that followed felt heavy, as if the weight of his announcement was sinking into every individual present. Sarah's heart stopped for a moment. Was she hearing this right? Was this a joke? Or a dream? Surely, there must have been some mistake. But as her eyes darted around the room, she saw the same shock mirrored on the faces of her classmates. They looked at each other as if they, too, were unsure if they had just heard what they thought they had. Some students glanced nervously at their phones, as if looking for some kind of confirmation, perhaps a message from the university or an alert that would explain that this was some kind of misunderstanding. Then it happened. A student in the front row couldn't hold it in any longer. A cheer exploded from deep within their chest, so loud it shook the air. Another student near the back began clapping, and soon the entire room was filled with claps, cheers, and gasps. It was as if someone had flipped a switch, and all the pent-up emotion, all the frustration, all the uncertainty, poured out in an instant. The sound was deafening. Sarah, still in shock, barely registered the noise around her. Her mind was racing. The weight of her $68,000 debt, the loans that had haunted her every decision for the past 4 years, was suddenly gone. Erased. How could this be? It couldn't be real, could it? She looked around at the students in the room, all of them reacting in different ways. Some were jumping out of their seats, others were hugging each other, their tears mixing with uncontrollable laughter. Some simply stood, staring at the screen, mouths open in disbelief, unable to process the enormity of what Musk had just said. Sarah's eyes welled up as she reached up to touch her face, feeling the tears that had suddenly sprung from nowhere. The burden that had weighed so heavily on her shoulders, the constant worry about how she was going to make ends meet after graduation, all of it had just disappeared. It was like someone had taken a giant weight off her chest, and for the first time in years, she could breathe freely. In that moment, the noise around her faded into the background. She wasn't aware of the students who were cheering or hugging or laughing. She was lost in her own thoughts, trying to process what was happening. How could this be possible? How could one person do this? Was this really happening? Was she going to wake up and realize it had been a dream? But no. This was real. The excitement in the room was too palpable, the emotion too raw. The students around her were celebrating in ways she hadn't seen before, some of them jumping, others dancing in the aisles, and many simply standing in awe, their faces wet with tears. On screen, Elon Musk's image shifted slightly as he leaned forward in his minimalist chair, his expression becoming more serious. There was no more smirk, no more joking around. He was direct now, as if addressing the entire world, not just the students in the auditorium. "You are the innovators of tomorrow," Musk said, his voice steady, firm, and genuine. "Your ideas shouldn't be stifled by financial chains. You've worked hard to get here, and I know that some of you have sacrificed more than you should ever have had to. But now, consider this a reset. This is your chance to dream without the burden of debt holding you back. Use it wisely. Take this opportunity and make the world a better place. The future is yours." The crowd's response was immediate, but this time it wasn't just cheers. It was a mixture of joy, disbelief, and deep, overwhelming gratitude. Students looked at each other, their faces filled with a mixture of wonder and amazement. It was as though they had been handed a gift they never imagined was possible, a gift that would allow them to shape their future without the constant shadow of financial uncertainty. Sarah, still in shock, could hardly believe what she was hearing. The world felt different now. All the stress, all the sleepless nights working part-time jobs, the endless cycle of taking on more loans, was suddenly gone. It was like someone had opened a door for her, a door she had never even known existed. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah could picture a future that wasn't weighed down by debt. She had always dreamed of working for a tech company, maybe even starting her own one day, but how could she do that with such a massive debt looming over her? But now, with one simple announcement, Musk had made it possible. The world she had been dreaming of, the future she had hoped for, now felt within reach. She could almost hear the voice of her younger self, the one who had dreamed of this moment, shouting in disbelief, "This is it. This is your chance. Don't mess it up." But it wasn't just Sarah. Every student in the room now had the same chance. The same opportunity. No more chains, no more debt. For once, their futures were in their hands, free of the constant worry that had shadowed them for so long. As the cheering continued, Musk's image on the screen remained calm and composed, as if he had expected this reaction. He waited for the crowd to settle before speaking again, his voice cutting through the noise. "I know this is a lot to take in," he said. "But trust me when I tell you this, you don't have to carry this burden anymore. It's time to dream bigger. It's time to build, to create, to think beyond what the world has told you is possible. You have the power to shape the future, and I'm here to give you the freedom to do just that. You are no longer limited by debt. You are free." With that, Musk's image disappeared from the screen, leaving the students to process everything that had just happened. The room was still filled with the sounds of celebration, but Sarah found herself lost in her own thoughts once more. This was a turning point, not just for her but for every student in that auditorium. For once, they were free to chase their dreams without the constant fear of financial ruin. For once, the weight of debt had been lifted, and the future was bright. As the auditorium slowly began to empty, Sarah stood up from her seat, her legs feeling weak beneath her. She didn't know what to do next, whether to laugh, to cry, or to jump in the air with joy. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel scared. She didn't feel like she was drowning in debt. She felt free. And in that freedom, something new began to take shape, a sense of possibility. The world, which had once seemed so unforgiving, now felt like a place where dreams could come true. As the news of Elon Musk's unprecedented act of clearing every student loan at Ridgewood University spread, the world took notice. What had seemed impossible, an act of pure generosity on such a massive scale, was now reality. The media outlets, always on the lookout for groundbreaking stories, swarmed the campus, eager to capture the ripple effect of Musk's actions. News anchors, journalists, and social media influencers flooded Ridgewood, their cameras and microphones capturing every student's reaction. A modern-day miracle, some headlines read. Others described it as the largest act of charity the world has ever seen. The news reverberated across the globe. Even in places far from the campus, people were discussing what had just happened. The country, once divided over so many issues, found itself united in awe of Musk's generosity. But Musk didn't stop there. Once he saw the profound impact his gesture had made, he didn't just sit back and enjoy the accolades. Instead, he issued a bold challenge to other billionaires and wealthy individuals, calling on them to follow his example and take action to address the growing student debt crisis that had burdened generations of young Americans. He made it clear, if one person could make such a difference, why couldn't others? It's time for all of us to do our part, Musk said in an interview. We need to stop treating student debt as a distant problem, and recognize that it's a national emergency. Every student deserves the chance to pursue their dreams without being shackled by financial ruin. This call to action sparked an intense national conversation about student debt, its implications, and the future of higher education. Politicians, activists, and everyday citizens began debating the issue on every platform, from Twitter to television. Could Musk's gesture inspire real, long-term change? Could others in positions of power follow his lead? Back at Ridgewood University, the transformation was immediate. Students walked the campus with a new energy, a sense of liberation in their every step. The weight of their financial burdens had been lifted, and it showed in their faces. No longer were they weighed down by the stress of loans they would spend decades trying to pay off. They walked with newfound confidence, their heads held high, no longer looking over their shoulders at looming debt collectors or the never-ending cycle of student loans. For Sarah Mitchell, this was nothing short of a miracle. She had spent the past few years feeling overwhelmed, caught in a cycle of working part-time jobs just to pay rent, tuition, and textbooks. There were times when she wasn't sure if she would even make it to graduation. And now, she was free from the $68,000 in student debt that had haunted her every decision. She couldn't quite believe it. Her final semester had once been a source of anxiety, but now it felt like a fresh start, a blank page ready to be filled with possibilities. For the first time in her college career, Sarah wasn't worried about the future. Instead, she was excited. It was as if the world had opened up to her in a way she hadn't thought possible. She started speaking more openly about her dreams that had always been pushed aside because of financial worries. Sarah had always wanted to start her own tech company. For years, it had felt like an impossible dream. With no family wealth to fall back on, no financial safety net, and a mountain of debt looming over her, starting a company seemed like an unattainable fantasy. But now, everything had changed. She began to research how to turn her ideas into reality, attending workshops and meetings that she would have once thought were beyond her reach. With no more student loans to worry about, she could finally focus on her studies and her entrepreneurial ambitions. She even began to network with some of the top minds in her field, her newfound confidence shining through as she introduced herself at conferences and events. One day, a few weeks after the announcement, Sarah found herself in a meeting with a group of successful tech entrepreneurs who had been inspired by Musk's actions. They spoke passionately about how they could mentor students like Sarah and help turn their visions into reality. This was the kind of opportunity she had never imagined could be within reach. And Sarah wasn't the only one who felt the effects. The entire campus had a different vibe. The students, who had once been weighed down by fear and uncertainty, were now filled with energy. They were eager to learn, to create, to innovate. The future no longer felt like a distant, unattainable goal, it felt immediate, within their grasp. Sarah wasn't just thinking about her own future anymore. She saw her peers, her friends beginning to think bigger, too. Some of them, like Daniel from the business department, had always dreamed of starting their own social enterprise. he had never been able to get funding for his ideas. But now, with his student debt erased, he was speaking with investors and preparing to launch his first business venture. Others, like Jessica from the medical program, were considering new career paths without the looming pressure of repaying tens of thousands of dollars. She had dreamed of working in global health, but she knew that the debt would make it nearly impossible to start her career in a way that matched her ambitions. But now, she was volunteering at global health organizations, preparing for a career that aligned with her dreams instead of working in a job she had taken just to pay off loans. The ripple effect of Musk's act had spread far beyond the students at Ridgewood. As other universities and colleges began to discuss the implications of the announcement, student leaders across the country found themselves standing in front of their peers, urging action. Could Musk's generosity spark a nationwide shift in how student debt was viewed? Could it pave the way for a new era of affordable education? In Washington, the conversation reached the halls of Congress. Lawmakers, both liberal and conservative, began to take a hard look at student debt reform. Some were inspired by Musk's example and called for large-scale policy changes that could make college more affordable for everyone. Others, of course, were skeptical. But the fact that the conversation was happening at all was a major shift. Sarah watched all of this unfold with a sense of pride. Musk had ignited something bigger than just a financial gift. He had started a movement. A movement that could reshape the future for millions of students. The idea that education shouldn't come with a lifelong price tag began to take root in the public consciousness. For Sarah, the changes were deeply personal. Her dream of becoming an entrepreneur had always been at the edge of her mind, always just out of reach. But now, it felt real. With no more debt to tie her down, she could devote herself fully to her passion for technology and innovation. She had the freedom to dream big and work toward those dreams without the suffocating worry of how she was going to pay for it all. She began to feel a sense of responsibility. She had been given this chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. In her heart, she knew she wasn't the only one. Every student at Ridgewood University was now empowered to pursue their dreams without fear. And Sarah wanted to make sure that others, in the future, would have the same opportunities. Her story was just one among many. Across the campus, students were starting to speak about their futures with confidence. The effects of Musk's gift were undeniable. The weight of debt had been lifted, and with that weight gone, there was nothing stopping them from achieving their goals. For the first time, Sarah truly felt free to take risks, free to fail, and most importantly, free to succeed. Sometimes, all it takes is one extraordinary act to rewrite countless futures. One moment. One decision. One gesture that has the power to alter the course of many lives. That was what Elon Musk did for the students of Ridgewood University. What started as a quiet, almost unnoticeable gesture had snowballed into a global movement, changing the very fabric of what it meant to be a student in today's world. For Sarah Mitchell, that moment was nothing short of miraculous. She had lived for years under the crushing weight of debt, an invisible force that dictated every choice she made. Her dreams, once vibrant and full of possibility, had been muted by the financial chains that bound her. The idea of becoming an entrepreneur, of starting her own company and making a real difference, had felt like a fantasy, an impossible goal that existed only in the far-off reaches of her mind. But when Elon Musk made the announcement that would forever change her life, everything shifted. It was as if someone had lifted a veil, revealing a world full of opportunities, where she no longer had to be held back by fear or financial burden. It wasn't just about the money. Yes, the $68,000 in student loans she'd carried for years had vanished in an instant, but what mattered most was what that financial freedom represented: the chance to dream again. The chance to chase those long-forgotten ambitions. The chance to believe that anything was possible. Elon Musk, for all his eccentricities and controversies, had seen something others had overlooked: the immense potential locked inside the minds of young people. When you free minds from the weight of worry, Musk had said, you unleash the power of possibility. Those words resonated deeply with Sarah, and with thousands of others who had been given the same opportunity to rebuild their futures. For Sarah, the gift wasn't just the end of her debt. It was the beginning of her new life. She began to see her future with clarity, a future where she could create the technology she had always dreamed of and make a real impact. Her long-held dream of becoming a tech entrepreneur no longer seemed impossible. It was now a tangible goal she could work toward. Every step she took, from researching how to launch her own business to networking with like-minded individuals, brought her closer to turning her dream into reality. But it wasn't just Sarah who was feeling this shift. All across the Ridgewood University campus, the transformation was profound. Students who had once struggled with their debt were now walking with their heads held high, their futures wide open before them. No longer burdened by loans, they had the freedom to pursue what they truly wanted. Some dreamed of starting businesses, while others aspired to work in fields that aligned with their values, like environmental sustainability, social justice, or global health. It was a new day at Ridgewood, one that had been made possible by a single act of generosity. The feeling was electric, a sense of possibility that coursed through every student, every hallway, every classroom. The financial worries that had once clouded their potential were gone, and in their place was a sense of liberation. A sense of purpose. But the ripple effect didn't stop at Ridgewood. The news of Elon Musk's gift spread like wildfire, sparking conversations around the country and the world. People began to question the systems that had allowed student debt to grow to such staggering levels. Was it really fair for young people to start their adult lives shackled by debt? Was this the best we could do for the next generation? The national conversation grew louder, fueled by Musk's challenge to other billionaires to follow his lead. As more people joined the discussion, the realization began to set in: student debt wasn't just an individual problem. It was a societal problem. And just as it had taken one person to start the wave of change, it could take many more to keep it going. In Congress, lawmakers began to debate the future of student debt reform. While the conversation was far from simple, the seeds of change had been planted. People were beginning to see the connections between education, opportunity, and financial freedom. It wasn't just about paying off loans, it was about creating a system where the pursuit of knowledge and the dream of success could be a reality for everyone, not just those who could afford it. For Sarah, this was the change she had been waiting for. She had always believed that education was a gateway to opportunity, but the mounting costs had made that belief feel like a distant dream. Musk's act proved that things didn't have to be that way. Education could be accessible to everyone, regardless of background or financial status. As Sarah continued her journey, she found herself wanting to give back. She had been given a rare opportunity, one that had changed the trajectory of her life, and she was determined to ensure others could experience that same transformation. She became involved in outreach programs for other students who were still struggling with debt, sharing her story and advocating for change. The sense of gratitude she felt for Musk's gift became a driving force in her own life. She wanted to help others unlock the potential within themselves, just as she had been given the chance to do. The students at Ridgewood University were no longer just a group of individuals working toward their own personal goals. They had become a community, united by the shared experience of liberation. Together, they began to dream bigger. They began to think about how they could use their education and newfound freedom to solve the world's problems, to create sustainable businesses, to fight climate change, to make healthcare more accessible, and to address issues like inequality and poverty. The future that had once seemed uncertain was now a bright, open landscape. And for Sarah, that future was filled with infinite possibilities. When you free minds from the weight of worry, you unleash the power of possibility. Those words would echo in Sarah's mind forever. They had become the motto for her own life and the guiding principle behind her work. It wasn't just about her dreams anymore, it was about creating a world where everyone regardless of background or financial status could unlock their own potential and create a future they believed in. For the first time in years, Sarah felt truly free. Free to be herself. Free to pursue her passions. Free to fail and to try again. And in that freedom, she knew that anything was possible.